The air was thick with the scent of fresh-cut grass and the distant hum of summer cicadas as Lincoln High School buzzed with the frenetic energy of the last day of junior year. It was June, the kind of day where the sun hung heavy in the sky, casting long shadows across the sprawling campus in the small town of Crestwood, Ohio. The school, a red brick monolith with ivy creeping up its walls, was a labyrinth of hallways and staircases, home to over 1,200 students. Today, the usual structure of classes had dissolved into a chaotic celebration of freedom. Students darted between classrooms, swapping yearbooks, scribbling messages, and making promises to stay in touch over the summer. The teachers, weary from a long year, leaned into the tradition, letting the kids roam with minimal supervision. For most, it was a day of laughter and nostalgia. For me, it was the day everything changed. My name is Ethan Caldwell, and I was 17. A lanky kid with a mop of brown hair and a habit of overthinking everything. I wasn't the most popular guy at Lincoln, but I had my crew, Jake, Mia, and Trevor, who made the monotony of high school bearable. We'd been inseparable since freshman year, bonded over late-night gaming sessions and a shared love of bad horror movies. That last day, we were sprawled out on the bleachers by the football field, the metal seats warm under our backs, trading yearbooks and cracking jokes about Mr. Hensley's infamous comb-over. The field stretched out before us, empty except for a few kids tossing a frisbee, their laughter echoing in the warm air. It was the kind of moment you wanted to bottle up and keep forever. But something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it at first, just a nagging itch at the back of my mind. Maybe it was the way the shadows seemed to shift under the bleachers, even though the sun was high. Or maybe it was the faint sound of footsteps crunching on gravel, too deliberate to be casual, somewhere behind us. I brushed it off, chalking it up to nerves about the summer ahead. I was set to work at my dad's hardware store, a prospect that filled me with equal parts dread and resignation. Jake, ever the optimist, was planning a road trip to Lake Erie, and Mia was already talking about her summer art program in Columbus. Trevor, quiet as always, just listened, his eyes scanning the horizon like he was waiting for something. The yearbook exchange was in full swing, and I flipped through mine, grinning at the messages scrawled in neon gel pens. Jake had written, "Don't let the hardware store turn you into a tool, Caldwell." Mia's note was a doodle of a cartoon Ethan wielding a hammer with "Stay weird" in her looping handwriting. Trevor's was simple. "See you on the other side." Typical Trevor, cryptic and vague. But as I turned the pages, my eyes landed on a signature I didn't recognize. It was inked in black, the letters sharp and angular, almost pressed into the paper. Lucas Harrow. Below it, a single line. "You'll know me soon enough." I frowned, flipping back to the junior class photos. No Lucas Harrow. I checked the sophomores, the freshmen, even the seniors. Nothing. The name didn't ring a bell, and I prided myself on knowing most people at Lincoln, at least by face. I showed the page to Mia, who squinted at it, her brow furrowing. "Weird," she said, brushing a strand of purple-dyed hair behind her ear. "Maybe he's new? Or a transfer who didn't get photographed?" "Yeah, maybe," I said, but the words felt hollow. The message wasn't friendly or funny like the others. It was pointed, like a warning. I shook it off, telling myself it was probably just some kid messing around, maybe someone who'd grabbed my yearbook during the classroom shuffle. But the unease lingered, a cold knot in my stomach. The day rolled on. and by late afternoon, the school was half empty, kids trickling out to start their summer. My friends and I decided to head to my place for a low-key hangout. Pizza, video games, maybe a movie. My house was a 20-minute walk from school, down Crestwood's main drag, past the diner with its flickering neon sign, and the old movie theater that hadn't shown a new film since the 90s. The town was quiet, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and the biggest scandal was usually a stolen garden gnome. But as we walked, I kept glancing over my shoulder, that same itch from the bleachers prickling my skin. "Yo, Ethan, you good?" Jake asked, tossing a hacky sack between his hands. He was the tallest of us, all limbs and boundless energy, his blonde hair perpetually tousled. "Yeah, just thought I heard something," I said, scanning the empty street. The others didn't seem to notice anything unusual, but Trevor's eyes met mine, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of something. Worry, maybe? Before he looked away, we got to my house, a 2-story colonial with peeling white paint and a creaky front porch. My parents were both at work, Dad at the store, Mom at the hospital, so we had the place to ourselves. The living room became our base camp, littered with pizza boxes and soda cans, as we settled in for a marathon of Resident Evil. The windows were open, letting in a warm breeze that carried the scent of honeysuckle from the backyard. For a while, everything felt normal. We laughed. We argued over who got the last slice, and we screamed at the TV when a zombie jump-scared us. But around 10 p.m., the mood shifted. It started with a sound, a faint thud from the backyard, like something heavy hitting the ground. We all froze, the game's eerie soundtrack filling the silence. "Probably just a raccoon," Mia said, but her voice was tight. She was curled up on the couch, her sketchbook abandoned beside her. "Raccoons don't thud like that," Trevor muttered, his eyes fixed on the window. He was always the cautious one, the guy who noticed things the rest of us missed. I got up, my heart thumping, and peered through the glass. The backyard was dark, the motion sensor light above the garage inexplicably off. I could just make out the outline of the old oak tree and the wooden fence that separated our property from the alley. Nothing moved. "Maybe it was the neighbor's cat," I said, trying to convince myself as much as them. Then it came again. Thud. This time, it was closer, near the fence. Jake, never one to back down, grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer. "Let's check it out," he said, his grin more bravado than bravery. Mia protested, but Trevor was already on his feet, and I couldn't let them go alone. We stepped onto the back porch. The air cooler now, the cicadas louder. Jake swept the flashlight beam across the yard, illuminating the grass, the tree, the fence. Nothing. "See? Probably just..." Jake's words cut off, as the beam caught something glinting near the fence. A piece of metal, half buried in the dirt. I moved closer, my sneakers sinking into the soft earth. It was a knife, small but sharp, its blade catching the light. My stomach dropped. "What the hell?" I whispered, picking it up by the handle. It was cold, heavier than it looked, and there was something carved into the hilt. LH. "Lucas Harrow?" Mia said, her voice barely audible. She'd followed me, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "That's what it stands for, right?" Before I could answer, a shadow moved at the edge of the yard, just beyond the flashlight's reach. It was quick, a flicker of motion, but it was human-shaped. Jake swung the beam toward it, but it was gone. "Who's there?" he shouted, his voice cracking. No answer, just the rustle of leaves in the breeze. "Let's go back inside," Trevor said, his tone urgent. We didn't argue. We bolted for the door, locking it behind us. My hands were shaking as I set the knife on the kitchen counter, its presence like a poison in the room. We sat in silence, the game forgotten, listening for any sound that didn't belong. The house felt too big, too exposed, the windows like eyes watching us from the dark. "Who is this guy?" Mia asked, her voice trembling. "Why is he messing with you?" "I don't know," I said, but my mind was racing. The yearbook signature, the knife, the shadow, it was too much to be a coincidence. Someone was targeting me, and I had no idea why. We stayed up all night, too wired to sleep, jumping at every creak of the house. When my parents got home the next morning, I showed them the knife and told them everything. My dad, a practical man who didn't believe in teenage nonsense, called the school, figuring it was some prank gone too far. The principal, Mrs. Whitaker, promised to look into it, but her tone was dismissive, like she was humoring us. She called back an hour later, her voice different, sharper, uneasy. "Ethan, there's no record of a Lucas Harrow at Lincoln High," she said. "Not now, not ever. We checked the yearbooks, the enrollment records, everything. Are you sure that's the name?" I was sure. I showed her the yearbook, the signature glaring up at us from the page. She frowned, flipping through her own copy of the junior class photos. "This page is blank in mine," she said, holding it up. My blood ran cold. The spot where Lucas Harrow's name and message were in my yearbook was empty in hers. Just a blank square of paper. "That's impossible," I said. But the evidence was right there. My parents exchanged a look, the kind that said they were starting to take this seriously. They called the police, who took the knife for evidence and promised to patrol the neighborhood. But Crestwood was a small town, and the police were more used to dealing with speeding tickets than mysterious stalkers. They didn't find anything. No footprints, no fingerprints, no trace of anyone in the alley. The summer stretched on, and the incident should have faded into the background. Just a weird story to tell at parties. But it didn't. I started noticing things. Small, unsettling things. A scratch on my car's windshield in the shape of an L. A crumpled note in my mailbox with no return address, just the words, "Soon enough," in that same angular handwriting. Once, I woke up to find my bedroom window cracked open, though I was sure I'd locked it. My friends tried to keep things light, but I could see the worry in their eyes. Trevor, especially, seemed haunted, like he knew more than he was saying. One night in July, we were at Jake's house, playing cards in his basement. The air was thick with humidity, the single window fogged up from the heat. Trevor was quieter than usual, his eyes darting to the window every few minutes. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "What's going on with you?" I asked, slamming my cards down. He hesitated, then pulled something from his pocket, a folded piece of paper. "I didn't want to freak you out," he said, unfolding it. It was a Polaroid, grainy and faded, showing the four of us on the bleachers that last day of school. But in the background, half hidden by the shadows, was a figure. It was too blurry to make out details, but it was tall, thin, and unmistakably watching us. "Where did you get this?" I asked, my voice shaking. "It was in my locker," Trevor said. "The day after we found the knife, I thought it was nothing, but why didn't you say anything?" Mia snapped, her face pale. "I didn't want to make it real," Trevor admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I've seen him. We sat in stunned silence, the weight of his words sinking in. This wasn't a prank anymore. It was something darker, something we didn't understand. We agreed to stick together, to watch each other's backs. But the fear was constant now, a shadow that followed us everywhere. By August, I was a wreck. I barely slept, jumping at every noise, checking the locks obsessively. My parents were talking about moving, but Crestwood was their home, and they didn't want to uproot our lives over what the police still called a series of coincidences. Then, one night, it all came to a head. I was alone in the house, my parents out at a town council meeting. The power had gone out, a common occurrence during Crestwood's summer storms. I was in the living room, a flashlight in hand, when I heard it, a slow, deliberate knock at the front door. My heart stopped. I crept to the window, peering through the blinds. A figure stood on the porch, shrouded in darkness, but I could make out the glint of something in his hand. A knife. I backed away, my breath shallow, and grabbed my phone to call 911. But before I could dial, the knocking stopped, replaced by a sound that chilled me to the bone. A low humming tune, like a lullaby, coming from just outside the door. I froze, paralyzed, as the humming grew louder, closer. Then, silence. The police arrived 20 minutes later, but the figure was gone. They found no evidence, no footprints, nothing. But on the porch, carved into the wood, was a single word. Harrow. The next day, I went to the school, desperate for answers. Mrs. Whitaker let me into the records room, where old yearbooks and files were kept. I spent hours combing through them, looking for any trace of Lucas Harrow. Finally, in a dusty box of unclaimed yearbooks from 20 years ago, I found something. A single photo, tucked between the pages. It was a boy, maybe 16, with sharp features and dark eyes that seemed to stare right through me. The name below it, Lucas Harrow. I showed it to Mrs. Whitaker, who went pale. "That's impossible," she said. "This yearbook is from 2003. He'd be in his 30s now." But the signature in my yearbook, the knife, the note, they were all too real. I contacted the Alumni Association, the police, anyone who might know something. The story that emerged was fragmented, but it was enough to make my blood run cold. Lucas Harrow had been a student at Lincoln High in 2003, a loner with a troubled home life. He'd been expelled after an incident no one would talk about, something involving a fire in the chem lab. After that, he'd vanished. No records, no social media, nothing. Some said he'd run away. Others, that he'd died. But the rumors, whispered by old teachers and former students, were darker. They said Lucas had been obsessed with a classmate, a boy he'd followed, watched, tormented. That boy had moved away, and Lucas had disappeared soon after. I didn't know what to believe, but I knew one thing. Lucas Harrow, or someone using his name, was after me. The police increased patrols, my parents installed a security system, but it didn't feel like enough. The figure in the shadows was always there, just out of sight, waiting. The school year started again, and I was a senior now, but the joy of it was gone. My friends and I stuck close, but the fear was a constant companion. One night in September, I got a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of me, taken from across the street, standing in my driveway. Below it, a single word. Soon. I showed it to the police, who traced the number to a burner phone, untraceable. But they did find something else. A record of a Lucas Harrow, born in 1987, who'd been admitted to a psychiatric facility in 2004, and released in 2010. No known address, no known family. Just a name and a shadow that wouldn't leave me alone. The final twist came in October, during the homecoming game. The stadium was packed, the air electric with cheers and the smell of popcorn. I was on the bleachers with Jake, Mia, and Trevor, trying to feel normal for the first time in months. But as the game wore on, I felt it again. That itch, that sense of being watched. I scanned the crowd, my eyes landing on a figure at the far end of the bleachers, half hidden in the shadows. He was tall, thin, his face obscured by a hoodie. But I knew it was him. I stood, my heart pounding, and pointed him out to my friends. Jake grabbed my arm, telling me to stay put, but I couldn't. I pushed through the crowd, my eyes locked on the figure. He didn't move, didn't run, just watched me approach. When I was close enough, he lowered his hood, and I saw his face. Older, weathered, but unmistakable. "Why are you doing this?" I shouted, my voice lost in the roar of the crowd. He didn't answer, just smiled. A cold, empty smile that made my skin crawl. Then he turned and slipped into the crowd, vanishing like smoke. I haven't seen him since. The police searched, but he was gone, like he'd never been there. The knife, the notes, the photo, they're all locked away in an evidence locker, but they don't explain anything. My parents finally agreed to move, and we left Crestwood in December, settling in a new town 2 hours away. I'm trying to move on, to focus on college apps and the future, but I can't shake the feeling that he's still out there, watching, waiting. Sometimes, late at night, I hear that humming, faint and distant, like a memory I can't escape. And I wonder if I'll ever know the truth about Lucas Harrow, or if some shadows are meant to stay just out of reach.